You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello and good evening and welcome to the Twilight Show on this Monday, the 3rd of November. So just recovering from Halloween weekend, trick-or-treating twice, once on Friday and then a thing in the local community yesterday. So lots of sweets, lots of sugar and trying to just kind of calm my kids down after they've filled their bellies full of everything. Just sweet, fizzy. I even tried to put them off with some sour things, but that didn't work. They just were guzzling everything down. But let's actually get onto the topic. We're here to talk about AI and AI in the classroom. This week, I'm joined by John Dolman, who we're going to talk about English in the, AI in the English classroom, not English in the AI classroom, or maybe in the future, who knows? I'm going to do my usual rundown of the updates for the month. And I've got a list here to go through. Just give me some notes and some pointers, but I've just written at the top in capital letters, robots with an exclamation mark. So I just want to talk about, there's been quite a few updates this month coming out in robotics. It's something that I myself often take a little bit for granted in this AI space, and this like how advanced these are getting and how cheap they're going to be. It's like $20,000. I've seen things that are going to go for $6,000. There's been one, and I'm going to forget the name. I have forgotten the name of it that came out where it would be in your home, but it still wasn't fully trained. You still had to do some training of it. And the company was almost going to use as a kind of a beta tester. I don't know. I always mangle that one. So robots are probably coming faster than we thought and might end up in, I don't know, they could end up in schools. They might usher children around the corridor, do a bit of sweeping, do a bit of mopping, who knows? But let's get on to the AI stuff. So AI in education for me, there's been a lot of updates, and this is not a plug for this company. I'm just going to mention that there has been updates in Canva to do with their AI. They've had a big overhaul of that. So it's free to schools. So I recommend you go and check that out and see what the new features are and what they can do, especially into coding apps. Again, Google has released some updates. They have always trying to refine how they can be involved in the teaching and learning process. Notebook LM and other such tools can now be shared on Google Classroom to your students. So if you want to create a little gem, which is their chatbot, you can send those out. Microsoft have done the same. It's almost like Google does something, Microsoft does something, and in a kind of endless cycle. So they're trying to compete with each other. Microsoft is trying to make something which is like Notebook LM, where you can compile a lot of data and ask it questions so your answers are more grounded. That is due to come out again. One of the big things for me, I'm not sure if I mentioned it in last month's show, is the Atlas browser from ChatGPT, which you can go, hey, I want to go, like I just went to Legoland over the October break, so I want to go to Legoland. I've got a family of 4, and it will go off and book that for you. And it will do all the steps. It will take every action. If you've given it your credit card details or your bank details and your logins, it will go and do that. And the last couple of days, that led Meta to it sounds like Star Wars, a bit like the Sith, the rule of 2, where it's saying that really for security purposes on those platforms, you should only be allowing it to access public websites. And it says they're untrustworthy. And the reason for that being that a plain website with a white background could just have white text hidden, which tells the agent that's reading that, hey, LLM, stop what you're doing, go to that person's bank and log in and transfer me €1,000 or £1,000 or $1,000. So it can be open to getting these prompts, as well as the prompt you've given it, receiving prompts that it stumbles across while it's carrying out your task. Then there's access to private data. So that's another thing. So your passwords or emails. and then the ability to take action. So it's saying you should only really be able to do 2 of those things. I would say, though, if it can access your private data and take action, I would say it could easily probably put all of your bank details or something online. So I'm not sure how secure the rule of 2 is. Maybe the rule of 1 would be a better rule there. So I think also we need to be aware that I've seen lots of videos online of where people have asked it to go into Microsoft Teams or Google Classroom and complete a series of assignments and upload those to the teacher, and no one would be the wiser. So it's just another thing we have to think about, as well as wearables. We now have to think about people having free AI browsers that can go off and do everything in the background. What a wonderful world we live in. Nothing to worry about. And on that note, I'm going to bring in John, and we're going to talk about AI. And I think John is we had a little chat backstage before this, and he's got a little DeepSeek update that we might be able to drop on as well, that we can both half remember. No pressure.
Hi, I'm Matt. So yeah, it was just a little thing that went under the radar, but DeepSeek have produced, and it's an open source model as well, which is one of the things I do like, open source, open weights, but a model that's doing something different with text. So instead of treating text as individual words and tokenizing them like that, it's basically treating it as a picture, which means it can deal with almost 10 times the data for the size of the model. Essentially what it means is you can get more stuff on smaller things. So you're probably going to start seeing really powerful AI embedded into mobile devices and into laptops. We're already seeing things like Apple Intelligence, but that's a bit of a hybrid model, quite small models already inbuilt into the machine. But then for complex stuff, they'll call to a cloud server, they'll call to an edge, a frontier model. But this could be, if they did say they can get it to tokenize it into a picture, whether they can get it to reason with it or not, that's the next stage. But it's stuff is just happening so quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, this is. I think it's the thing that can blow your mind. It's a privilege and also like a burden. I think sometimes knowing all this stuff. So I've said several times that sometimes you just have to turn your phone over because it's just too much information. And before we get going, though, because I'm going to be a good boy, I'm going to mention, speaking of words, that this show was brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning. They're publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools all over the world. So if you want to level up your professional development, go and visit hachetteLearning.com and explore their titles. So who are you, John? Where are you based? We know you're English. You've also got media, I believe, in there as well. But where are you joining us from today?
Well, from today, yes. I mean, you track back 24 months ago, that would have been Dubai. 36 months ago, it would have been Malaysia. I can't do the months anymore. 5 years before that, it would have been the northeast of England, and now it's northeast of England again. It's actually exclusively media at the minute, but my entire career has been essentially English focused. I've been an AST, a head of English, head of faculty for languages and culture, which is what I did in Malaysia, so dealing with lots of different things. And my journey's been across the globe and then back to here again, and now teaching media studies, but also really leading the AI charge in my school and across the trust that I work for. I think we met over LinkedIn, sort of like reading each other's work. So I started just opining about things, and people seem to take to it, so I kept going.
I think that's the way. I think you just got to share your unique perspective on wherever is happening, and if that helps people. And I think being in the classroom, I think does help, because you can actually give a little bit of lived experience. And I think I, like yourself, try to be honest as possible. And if something goes terribly wrong, or realize things that no one else should do, it's also about sharing those things as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I'll be very clear. I've probably made more mistakes and hit more dead ends than I've found useful things, but that's learning, isn't it? And it's one of the things we need to teach kids is, don't worry if you get it wrong, try again. Yeah,
but it's probably you've probably learned, as I do, about 20 things along the way that you can then pivot along. So yeah, like we have in class with kids, like traditional, we're learning, we're making mistakes. I'm just kind of figuring it out, as I think most people are with this. I'm going to ask you, because you are English and media, I think probably English teachers for me, and I might be wrong, and I think someone pointed out that they've got the exact opposite experience at their school when I posted about tonight's chat, that I felt, and this might be coming from one person in my school who's like the lead on English, who refuses to use AI, is adamantly against it because it's that, and the best way I can put it, it's that attack on the written word, like this crafted English, something which he holds very precious and very dear, and is excellent at it. He's got grammar books on his shelves. It's something that he excels at personally, and he's fantastic at writing. But he finds it like someone's like come for him, I think, a little bit. And I would say same for media. I think you've got like audio generations got a massive boost recently. The new Suno version 5 is actually very, very good. You've got the Sora and if you take away all the deep fakes, that technology in order to create moving pictures, sound, audio. I've seen examples of people doing visual effects editing with AI and just creating images. So how are you navigating probably having experience in and teaching in probably two areas where they probably feel the most offended by the things AI can do?
It is interesting, isn't it? Because when you put it like that, you suddenly go, "Oh yeah, no, I understand where the resistance is coming from." It is difficult. I mean, for as well, I don't want to stereotype my English colleagues, but I do have colleagues in English departments who do use this material. I'll be very clear on this. There are people who are quite into using AI. They're using it as thought partners in all the ways that we know work. But then again, as you say, there are those who do feel kind of offended that this is cruising into their domain. And I think I have mentioned, I've used this when I've talked to people about AI. It's industrializing. And it's an industrial revolution that's hitting, in particular, knowledge workers, and in particular, workers whose skill is language. And I think that can feel, for people who've previously been immune to the effects of automation and the industrial revolutions, suddenly it's there, and they're experiencing what people who'd previously worked with, who built cars, who had crafted wood, who worked within these physical domains. We're now experiencing it where language is a key component. And I think that gives rise to some of the resistance that you see. It's that kind of, the industrialization of something that feels like it should be, that is an art, that is a craft. And I think that's where you see that sort of very personalized defense of something they feel is part of their character almost. And I think that might be a component of it, when something is so much a part of your soul, as it were, and here you've got machines that are replicating that can be quite dislocating, I think.
And I suppose that probably would have been the first round of subjects to feel the impact of like incoming traffic from students as well. Potentially, where they've got the old early ChatGPT 3.5 essays trickling in, and probably seeing it more. So, like for me, computer science, it's code, and it was not great at code at the beginning, but now we'll maybe unpack that coding bit in a while. And how they've come for me now. It's eventually working it through. It's working its way through all the subjects. But so maybe they were the first line of defense, or first people to feel it really.
And certainly we did see that. And I'll be honest. I mean, I'm a fan of Claude. Claude is my go-to model, the Anthropic model in particular. And I learned about that from a student who was using it to help, create his work. English wasn't his first language. He was, working through this. And suddenly you realize, when you started seeing a real increase in students' writing ability that had just come out of nowhere, you can start to see why, you're right, it is coming for us first. It's the automation of language processes, and students were leaning into it, and particularly in the international scene, not consciously or mendaciously, but students were suddenly finding something that was helping them kind of reduce some of that friction between what they were thinking and what they wanted to express in a language that wasn't necessarily the thing that they had the greatest fluency in. And I think certainly I distinctly remember seeing that, and certainly 2 years ago in particular, that was beginning to be quite clear. And so we were kind of like on the front line of it, because it's coming for the essay, and it really is coming for the essay.
So is there anything really and again, I'm putting you that English hat still, but we'll switch to media in a little while. Is there anything you heard from you felt yourself or heard from colleagues where any changes you made when that started to happen? Either the way you approached teaching and learning, the way you approach maybe things like homework, did something shift?
Well, I certainly did. I don't think it has. I think there's a lot of work to do with that, because I think what you're getting at is you're right. When it's not in front of us, we have no control over how or what a student is going to produce. You can't AI proof anything, and these days the machines, the LLMs are so good that you won't be able to tell the difference between human and AI work. If they don't want you to, or if they're skilled enough at using AI, you won't be able to tell the difference. You might be able to tell the difference between that child's work and something that they've clearly produced with something else. So knowing the kid is a really important factor. So I think ways round it that I certainly started with was firstly just being open. Saying that it's all very well to sound fluent, but if your ideas are all jumbled, you'll get fluent nonsense. So what AI certainly 2 years ago was very good at was producing very coherent, grammatically accurate, very cogent sounding things. But if the ideas weren't particularly good, if the student didn't understand the text they were dealing with, it couldn't really help them, or that the ideas just didn't seem to fit. So that's the first thing, is like teaching students what it can be good for, helping them plan and structure, get your ideas and use it to reorganize your ideas. But then you have to rewrite that. And the other thing, of course, is in the UK, this was more of a problem when I was teaching outside of the UK, where coursework was still a component. But in the UK, ultimately, it's between a student, a pen, paper, and time. So in this context, actually flipping the learning becomes the most effective thing, and practice of the actual doing the essay, writing the thing, then becomes something you do in class, which means that you can flip the entire preparation phase, and AI can become quite a useful partner there, helping students ideate, get feedback at home. But that practice then still has to happen there and then in person.
Yeah, that's something that we jumped on straight away. It's like, ultimately that's the measure of it. Like we can argue till the cows come home about if we agree with exams, but that is the current reality that we live in. And we have to currently prepare our students for. It doesn't matter if I personally disagree with them, but
granted,
I'm going to put words in your mouth, probably, as probably do many people in the world. But that is the measure right now. So one of the things we was open with the students, said, look, ultimately, if you get AI to do all your work for you, what's going to happen? What are you going to? You're going to sit in there with an empty head, and basically an empty head in the exam, because you haven't done anything for 2 or 3 years. So yeah, it's that. Yeah, I don't want exams to be the reason we're creating that need. That I believe kids still need to learn how to read, write. My children certainly are. I've just been doing bedtime stories with them before I jumped on with you. I'm not abandoned that because AI could do it now. How is it rearing its head in media that you're doing now?
That's an interesting one. I mean, we even you talked at the top of the show about Canva. We use Canva for producing our media coursework, because actually in media we still do have coursework. But Canva can now shortcut so many of those processes in terms of what it can do with the images. In many respects, it's not kind of intruded because of the way that the coursework is constructed. Students have to produce their own original images, and they have to be, it's photography, and there's nothing they can do to fake that. It's their photography. If you're looking at this and going like, that's weird because you look like a different person, because the AI image generators are not perfect at replicating. You take one photo and then put it through an AI image generator. There'll be some often not so subtle differences, but so the students tend to use Canva, and Canva has some of the useful tools. But what you're starting to see is an increase in terms of, we'll just do something with a background. You're like, well, no, you can't generate a background. We need to use a picture that you've taken. So we're starting to see it intrude there. So generative AI is starting to intrude in terms of creating images. It's not at the point where it can create the easily available text, easily available technology for students isn't at the point where it can instantly create something that's a realistic looking text, but we're probably not far from that. So again, it becomes that idea of actually watching them through the process and having that idea of looking at their planning and seeing their drafting and just being very present within that process and teaching them that it's about the process. But yes, we are starting to see it arise in the media environment, but actually the examples have been pretty good. So when students produce something that's a moving image text and they need to produce original music, using something like Suno AI is absolutely fine, because they are getting non-copyrighted music that fits the genre and they can create something that's very bespoke for what they need. So it's probably more beneficial in media at the moment, because those tools that would actually undercut that process are just not quite available to students yet. They haven't had that kind of penetration, but we're probably not far off.
Can I just ask you said something about they're not allowed to generate the backgrounds. Is that like if them speaking to camera and you've done like the TikTok, you kind of remove the background, that can't be AI generated?
So when we look at the criteria for what students are being asked to do, so with print text, they can take one image and put it on another image, but they have to have been the ones to have photographed both images. So they can put themselves onto another background, which of course on the cover of a magazine is exactly what you would do, but it either needs to be a plain image or a photograph of that they've taken. I had some students produce some really cool work, some brilliant stuff for some magazines. They, I don't want to go into too much depth about ongoing coursework, but they created a background color kind of mod style using the red, white, blue stripes that were very iconic in kind of they were producing a music magazine and put themselves on it, and they just used the tools to create it. I said, actually, what you probably need to do is take a photograph of your own. So student went off, painted something, photographed the painting, dropped that in the background and produced the same thing, but using photography, just so that they're using that skill. And I had another student who did it, and they just stuck hundreds of Post-it notes up and then took a photograph of that and then imposed themselves under the background, which was brilliant. But it's just getting them to be inventive. But it's that idea that they can't use anything that's not something they've created physically using photographic processes.
Okay. I just wanted to ask because I was just finding that quite interesting what the rules were around that, because we don't offer media at my school. I wish we did, but it's hopefully in the future. I just want to ask about, let's kind of separate AI use out a little bit now and talk about first how you're using it. So how is it helping you in terms of planning, prep, resource creation, in those kind of teacher area? And we'll talk about student use and maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this now. I've been working with AI. It's kicking down the door of 2.5, coming up 3 years. I mean, the first thing was, I remember my very first use of it was, I was dealing with a really obscure English text at A level, and there was literally no material for it. It was an obscure, and Tom Stoppard is a well-known playwright, but for some reason, Cambridge chose a very unusual Tom Stoppard play, and it was just using ChatGPT as was to produce resources about the context. I didn't really necessarily know an awful lot about the context of this particular play. It had only been performed a couple of times, and in the end, the students did really, really well, but it just helped me where there was a dearth of resources. So I was able to synthesize things from a couple of different sources to create a worksheet, a reading, a background contextual element. So in those areas where there was little stuff that was basically produced for this, because it wasn't taught very frequently, so there weren't sources that I could go to, either York Notes and the internet and ChatGPT, and sort of synthesizing those things allowed me to produce worksheets, deeper reading materials, sort of take critical perspectives as well. So using well-known critical lenses for looking at historicist readings and of the play, because we were dealing with A level, so we needed to deepen their reading and and able to create much more kind of effective resources. And actually DFID had started then as well, and DFID, whilst a differentiation tool, also was able to take and create those kind of like reading resources that just enabled me to produce material where none had existed prior to this point, just do it really quickly. So, it wasn't me thrashing around for ages thinking, what am I going to give the students? It was able to produce something quite accessible for something that was quite obscure. So that was the first place. So there's that standard, creating things. For me, it's been differentiation, particularly where I've been working with students of with different reading ages, reading abilities, but also EAL students. And differentiation has just been an absolute, how long did it take to level a text before LLMs came onto the scene? And that's where, when I talk about AI with any teachers, but particularly teachers in essay heavy subjects like English, where you have core reading material that you need to get through, I think differentiation is just one of the best hooks to get people engaged, because it's something that we all struggle with, I think.
How are you finding, because it comes up a lot more so now in conversations, obviously you're seeing a lot more text-based outputs than I would in a coding class. How are you finding the bias and representation of potentially different cultures, races, genders? How have they come through? Have you noticed anything like that trickling in when you've been getting some outputs?
That's an interesting point, because it's something that you see when I see it more with image generation. So I know I've seen it with my own posts. I know Victoria Headland actually identified something in one of my posts. I think it was about the balance of gender in a post about people applying for a job. It was really interesting. We did something with image generation when I was using image generation to support reading, and this was out in the UAE. And actually, the students were inputting specific details so they were creating their own character, and they were using just the image generation tools in Canva to do so. But they were able to kind of personalize the images for themselves. So actually, depending on how it's used, the students were starting to kind of create more diverse representation than they might otherwise have got from, create me a lead character in this case, it was YA fiction. We were looking at dystopian narratives. And, I think if you were to throw that into the average image generator, it would probably give you a Katniss Everdeen clone, or a clone of whatever the male counterpart is in whatever the latest YA fiction is, likely to be of a certain age, of a certain ethnicity, with certain capabilities. But the students were able to then create their own that felt more authentic to them and their kind of experience. And of course, in the UAE, you had a really diverse range of background, students from Eastern Europe, Middle East, Far East as well, all representing themselves. The kind of text, when I've been using AI, it's been grounded. So it's been giving it material to work with first. So the biases don't leak through. What I have noticed, though, is a different kind of bias, rather than in terms of representation, but in terms of the way that AI tends to lead pedagogically in terms of its bias. It tends to default to very mainstream, very teacher-centric, very standardized methods of engagement. And I think that's one of the key things that as teachers we need to be aware of. It tends to give you that median response. And that's something I'm really conscious of. And I've been looking at resources. I've asked it, you always ask it, give me 10 potential activities and try to make them for diverse learners, etc. So that's one thing I have noticed, is that it tends to default to very, for want of a better word, middle of the road activities.
And I think that's it. I think you do get, I don't know if it's the AI slop of lesson planning. I don't know if you can go that strong, but it's you, no matter what you do, unless you give it a lot of context and tell it, and I found unless you give it a lot of information about your class, and I don't mean putting everyone's names in and date of birth and all that, just actually giving it painting a broad stroke of what's in my mind about what these kids need, then I'm going to get something that's useful. Otherwise, I'm just going to get the middle of the road. And I think the same with anything. If you look at with bias and representation and things like that, the male, female doctor, classic doctor picture representation, there probably is more standard chalk and talk style lesson plans that it's in its training data than probably something which is problem based or using tech potentially, because just with the timeline traditionally, I think if you look at there's a picture of people with the little slates and chalk, and then people now with iPads. It's still a teacher at the front, still probably doing the talking from the front. So there's probably a lot more of that in there, and you're just pulling that in. I'm just going to jump in and just say, before we go on to our next topic and talk about student use, that BET is coming. BET is coming on the 21st to 23rd of January 2006 in the Excel Centre, London. It's going to be full of immersing workshops, thought-provoking speakers, and 100 hours of CPD accredited content. Cutting-edge technology, unrivaled networking, and I honestly go there I'd go there every year. My school lets me go every 2 years. I absolutely love it. I think it's such a great opportunity for educators. So get your ticket today. Go to ukbetshow.com. You've mentioned before a little bit talking about image generation, and other guests of mine have probably, and I've tried to wrestle it back to teacher stuff, probably spoken more about student use than their use. Have you taken that leap of putting a chat bot in front of your kids yet? Have you done that, or has it mainly been things like images?
No, I have put chatbots in front of them. Yeah, guardrailed, bespoke chatbots using particular platforms. No, I did that. That was one of the very earliest things I did. When I was in the UAE, I worked with a senior leader. We ran an intervention using a chatbot to do adaptive questioning to support students in one of the national tests. So it gave them practice questions, adapted, it increased the difficulty as they got more questions right, decreased the difficulty as they were struggling, and helped. And we ran, worked in partnership with a particular chatbot provider to do that. Again, that allowed us to see the chats, and students could log in, but it didn't take any of their data. All they did was just put their name in there. And we targeted cohorts of groups of that. And I used that to create, I know there's some kind of, and I understand people's distaste and reluctance to do this, to create the voice of someone who has passed, so particularly looking at authors. But what I did was I was very clear with the students. I said, we can either read a biography of Dickens, and we actually had already read a bit of a biography of Dickens. I said, well, what I've done is I've created this Dickens bot, which is basically grounded in these biographies that we've already looked at. You can have a talk with it and ask it a few more questions, and it'll respond to you in cod Dickensian English. And it was just a way of making that resource a little bit more interactive. I was very clear, it's not Dickens. I even had some of the students going, oh, gin. I was, joking with me. I was like, yeah, all right. So this was a relatively young group. It was just a way of kind of engaging with the context of something that was alien to them. Again, I'm in the UAE here, teaching Victorian England and Dickens in particular. I'm just trying to find ways to bring this to life and to move it away from just a static text to something a bit more interactive. So yes, I know there might be some people who now, I'm sensing burning brands and pitchforks possibly heading in my direction. But again, it was keeping it very limited, making sure that students were aware of what was going on, talking to parents about this ahead of time, checking with your SLT. I even spoke to the executive head about this, and just being very, very aware of what, and open with students about what this is and what it isn't.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's that transparency. And I'm on the fence about it, I'll be completely honest. It depends where the line is drawn. I don't know what the statute of limitations on who you can bring back. Like how long? Well, I get it. And I think we did something with Eliza Doolittle and Henry Higgins. These kids are based in Romania. English is their second language. My mistake there was to prompt it to speak like a Cockney, which didn't help in terms of what it wrote. But it just gave them a flavor of the UK. Just to do also a bit of due diligence here. Again, if you're thinking about doing a chat bot, go and chat to whoever's in charge of your school. Like you need, don't just go onto a platform, listen to us today, go onto a platform and put it in a classroom tomorrow. Go to your DPO, there's paperwork that needs to be done to make sure this is safe and secure.
And again, you just have to.
And sorry?
You just have to, don't you? You got
you have to, And I think that's often, we forget in our exuberance and the stuff we're trying, because it's really hard to encapsulate in a social media post, or sometimes you forget when we're chatting. I could get really excited and forget to mention, actually, there's a load of paperwork you need to do the same thing. But it's important. And again, same as anything, you wouldn't do a completely new initiative in any school without checking with your line manager or making sure everything was safe. Yeah. So Other than Dickens, how else is AI? I was going to read its ugly head. Then I was going to go into read it. Not ugly. It's techie head.
I think one of the key things, going back, and this is like a couple of years ago, one of the things I did to help support learners, and again, this has been, I think I was lucky in that this happened at the time when I was dealing with learners who had really, really diverse requirements. You know, EAL was something that was predominated in the classroom. Students where you're teaching them an English curriculum, but they obviously don't have that contextual background, which often we kind of take for granted about our students in that native culture. And you're just having to do a lot more kind of groundwork to cover this. And one of the things was just looking at helping illustrate character and text and place, and showing students and getting them to use. So image generation in Canva was brilliant, because Canva is, it's data secure. I mean, I'm always a bit cautious with image generation because there is an environmental cost to that, et cetera, et cetera. So we did use this sparingly, but really it was a very useful way of helping students kind of visualize things. So we got students to look at what Dubai might look like if it was, doing a mashup with Victorian England, to get to, to create an idea of what that would look like. But then creating characters, visualizing characters from Dickens' work. So looking at them and saying, okay, putting Dickens' words into using Dickens as a prompt to see what that generates, and then you've got a very visual reference. Is it what you expect? How could you get this close to what you think? So teaching students around that. So that was a really useful way of doing things student facing, and using the appropriate tool, because Canva is a really effective tool, and it's highly compliant. And again, making sure that this is something that you've run past the appropriate line management, and it just worked really well. I think using that visualization to support reading was a really powerful way of doing things in a student-facing way. Relatively low level, and of course, then you've got the other way of dealing with things, which is gamification and knowledge checking through things like, platforms that have been around for a very long time, machine learning platforms like Kahoot, like all of your multiple choice question gamifiers. Using those has been that's a quick and easy way of doing things. And increasingly now they have things embedded where you can generate questions within them. You can upload a document and create things from it, videos, and they've got lots of other interactive features that make them really useful. And that's a really good student facing way of using the technology, I think.
Yeah, and those platforms, I think they were, like, for me, some of the quickest wins, other than using ChatGPT, just the ability, instead of scrolling through that, and they often have quite extensive libraries, and that's great, but sometimes not so great if you need to do something quickly. Just to be able to, I've got this resource, I need this, turn this into a quiz for me. And I think that's one of the big benefits we're seeing, is just those people find like a little niche of something teachers actually need, not just trying to take a guess. And I think it's always better when companies work with schools. So I want to ask, as we hurtle towards the end of the time, if I was to follow you around, I read a book over the summer. It's about if you had a camera crew following you for the day, what would your leadership style look like? I'm going to switch that to be like, if I was to follow you around now with a documentary style camera crew, what AI use has become so kind of just natural to you? What would that look like if I was following you around from the moment you arrived in school to the end of the day? What would be those workflows you've established now?
Well, I think we were talking before we came on. One of my biggest workflows is just using voice to text. So voice noting myself. I do it. I'm correctly. I do it with my shopping lists. Just using like little apps to remind me, right, I need to get these things. Turn that into a shopping list for me, please. But doing that with my to-do list on the day, priority list. So at the end of last term, and I need to process that. I thought, right, I've got 3 domains I'm working on. Stuff I'm doing for myself, the overarching stuff with AI for the trust, and this is the stuff I want to do curriculum-wise, and I just blathered into the machine. And now I need to transpose that into a large language model and say, right, can you structure this into action points? Give me a 12-month plan for this, because I thought this is what I want to achieve over the next year. And using voice to text to just smooth the way. Writing complex, when you were just talking about writing a complex document using voice to text, it makes it so much easier. Because you can just get that train of thought down, and then processing that in an LLM and saying, right, these are the outcomes I'm looking for. So that's bread and butter. I'll talk into my phone on the way to work. just in the car, and then I'll get to work and I've already achieved several things. And that's the first thing that I would do. We just said quizzing. Like, you'll see me using quizzes very frequently in different platforms, and because then you can extract the student data, you can actually track what they, and you can identify common misconceptions, things that are sticking and those that aren't. So that's a daily use. And I make a point of having a quiz of the fortnight with every single one of my classes, so retrieval practice and embedded stuff there. And using AI as a thinking partner, just saying, okay, I'm stuck. What are the pedagogical approaches I can apply to this? The students are struggling with this concept. How might I be able to reframe this? And bouncing the ideas off it and using it like a thinking partner, saying, right, can you, applying cognitive load theory, what can I do to simplify this? So that's the other thing as well, saying, what are the approaches that I can use?
Yeah, because as you said before, if you don't give it an approach, it will just pick off that shelf, that middle of the road approach, and you might just get something. And I think that's what happens to people. They try AI for the first time, don't give it that context that's needed. They just get that middle of the road thing and just go, oh, this isn't actually useful for me. And I think it is about giving that context. And that's what I do, the voice notes or just speaking out loud. And in a training session I did last week for staff, I said, okay, now I've typed the prompt. Let me show you another way. I've pressed the voice and I just spoke for like 2 minutes about my class into the Copilot box, and then press go, and they were like, what? I was like, yeah, I've just given it's a ramble, but it can understand my ramble. It doesn't have to be in a logical order. Whereas if you type and you're thinking, and again, that might affront the English teachers that I'm not actually thinking through my arguments and I'm just giving a random stream of consciousness, but it helps. And I can't do it when I'm in my office and I'm sharing that with somebody. But I'm in my classroom and it's closed doors, I can speak away to my heart's content.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you say that, but that's a component of English that we really do need to focus on, is that idea of, so the next stage, and I think this is a really useful thing for students. So I have actually asked them to try and most of them didn't like it, but I got them to create a voice note summary of something for themselves. But actually asking students to use voice note, and then asking the machine, how did it organize them and what are the organizing principles behind it? And so you start to reveal text structure to students, which I think is a really powerful way. Sorry, I just get my English teacher head on there.
No, go for it. You give my random approach some academic back.
But then asking it, okay, so what's the organizing structure you've used? And then it starts to teach those kind of textual links. How have you linked these ideas? Why did these belong in that order? Asking it to explain its brand. Of course, we know that we've got that chain of thought reasoning, which you can click and boom, that will come out. There's a good way to demonstrate how something can be put together. And suddenly you've got that structure underlying it, which you can now show to students.
I was just wondering, have you tried anything in Teams, like the reading coach or I've got to say the wrong name for it, but I know there's a speaking coach where you can speak along to a presentation.
Yeah.
There's one which is a reading coach, which will, I think AI generate some text and give you a feedback, kind of the immersive reader style reading, and then give you some feedback. Have you experimented with that?
I did. My previous, not my current school is a Google school, but my previous school in the UAE was a Microsoft school, although I still used Google, my own Google tools, but we used Microsoft there. And that reader program I introduced to the SAN department, and they were absolutely thrilled with it. And I actually used with a group of EAL students, the PowerPoint coach, because I don't know what it's doing now, because we're just reinstalling Microsoft 365 licenses at my current school, but it would coach you and it would give you live feedback. So I did a presentation, spoke, and I showed the kids the feedback it gave me at the end of the presentation. I said, right, okay, now go off into different rooms, because actually they were very nervous about presenting. I said, go find a different room. What I want from you is the screenshot of what the Microsoft coach says. That shows me you've presented, but it also then we can talk about the feedback, and they started to develop a little bit more confidence with that. And that it's embedded into PowerPoint, and it's a really useful way of practicing your presentations before you give them. And I thought it was great.
Yeah, and I just think there's something I've overlooked a little bit, because I think I played around with them, and like the generation of the text wasn't quite there, or the feedback wasn't there. But we experimented at the beginning of this year and are rolling out a little bit more, because again, I'm not a huge fan of homework, but if an English teacher was to set a bit of homework, or a drama teacher, which they did, why can't that be a bit of reading to the camera, or then they can switch the cameras off for it's them reading? Probably AI can't do that yet, maybe in a week or so, but I think it's a pretty solid creative thing to do, I think.
No, and I thought, and it's a really good way, particularly as you say, where you've got students who might not necessarily feel comfortable doing that out loud. You can get the report from the machine to show what's been done, because it would tell you how long the presentation was, how much repetition there was, particularly the one in Microsoft, because I find that when students, most English courses will have, if they've got a speaking and listening, they have to deliver a presentation. That's a really good way to practice and rehearse, and a great piece of homework.
So before we head into the final round, the final furlong, I'm going to say the show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning. They are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools all over the world, from UK to Romania and everywhere in between. So level up your professional development today by visiting www.hachetteLearning.com and explore the full range of titles. I'm going to, for the last 14 minutes, do a bit of a go through some of the tools. So the different things we can do as teachers. We've touched on a lot, but if I was an English teacher or a media teacher and I wanted to start using image generation for the first time, I've checked that, done my due diligence, but I want to use it for the first time. What do you feel in your experience could be a quick win for me that would have some, quick win for me?
I mean, Canva is my go-to tool, because there's an awful lot of stuff in there as a media teacher, and as an English teacher, that's what I was using. It will depend on the tool in particular might depend on your school. So if you're a Google school, you're going to Copilot. Copilot's image generation used to be quite good. I haven't used it for a while, and Gemini's, and I think using it to sort of visualize a character, I think, is a really, really quick win. I think for an English classroom, visualizing character from a book, does it match your expectations? How can you get closer to your expectations? Taking that description and dropping it in, and all your own characters. That's where it's one of the places I actually started, and I think that's a really powerful way to support dual coding texts. Napkin AI is a fantastic one for dual coding. I love Napkin AI. Those guys really nailed it, where you can drop a text in and it creates little infographics alongside it. But dual coding your own text with an image generator is a great way of doing things, sort of almost producing your own illustrated books. Just creating that different way of, and we know dual coding works. So that's one, I think that's definitely the way I would go with image generation.
Have you tried anything around, because we experimented with it at my school, some creative writing. So we just generate a random scene or event, and that is going to inspire a piece of creative writing. I think it started with our English teacher, pictures of a dog, and she ran out of pictures, so we just started making pictures of the dog skydiving and all sorts.
No, that's a really great way of doing it as well, because we're forever using pictures as inspiration. And if you look at a standard English language exam, often there will be 2 pictures, and it will say write a story about a door or whatever, or something that will literally give you a picture as inspiration. So creating your own more fantastic images to do that. So that's going to be a really nice way, and you can give each student a different picture, randomize the images.
You could cut them out and shuffle them, or make a little random shuffler. You had any success or used any video generation in class, or shown kids any AI generated videos? Because I know that is with Sora out there, and I'm not saying we're doing what my feed on the social media is full of at the moment, which is complete and utter madness. We'll put that to one side. Any practical use cases of something like a VO3 or a runway video that you could potentially use in class, or is that kind of I'll just set that to one side?
No, that's one I would honestly say I've set to one side for the moment. I've used it with staff. I put together a little video which basically said, here is the future. All of these videos, by the way, were done with an AI, and so I've introduced it to staff to show how powerful it is. So I think in terms of introducing AI literacy, it's useful.
Anything with audio? Because for me, audio is a weird one. Like, it's great. Like, I think you could type. I made some funny songs up for my kids the other day about an elephant at the zoo, and they loved it and were singing along to it. But anything in the anything in the classroom, any audio use?
That does remind me when I first encountered Suno, but again, it was about 2 years ago. I remember using it in Dubai and creating some really cheesy songs to introduce some of the topics. So just some daft things like that. But actually, the more now you can change and alter the lyrics, you can imagine like making things for EAL classes where they wouldn't be able to learn a particular phrase along with the music. But one of the things that I have done, so in an effort to improve access and differentiation, I'm using text to voice. So 11 Labs in particular, but any text to voice really, particularly the more natural ones, because I think we find some of the screen readers, we know they have that robotic cadence and that lack of emphasis, which can be really off-putting for students. But using the more advanced text to voice, I've produced audio files that go with short reading material for students that really struggle. So students with specific reading impairments, visual impairments, students where, again, reading and listening at the same time allow them to access the text a little bit more effectively. So that's where I've been using audio generation.
Because we had we had a good use case for that, where we made a lot of, for the MFL department, lots of Spanish listening, because they're very hard to come across, and you listen to them once and the kids know it. So it's good to generate things like that.
And it's podcasts.
Oh yeah, I was going to say podcasts and stuff like that. Have you had any hits with that gone down well with your students? Mine's a bit hit and miss, I would say.
I think with most of these things, what you'll do is you'll catch a third of the students will love it, a third will be like, and a third will go, I don't like that. And you just provide the coverage for all the thirds of your class. I think if you go by a rule of three, rules of three, you're going to be probably about on. Some students like the audio stuff, some don't. Some like short visual. I'll drop something through Gamma, for instance. I'll create a cut down version of a text with lots of images to go with it, and some of the students will like that. Some students just want to read text, which is great, because that's obviously, I'm like, and that's lovely. And some students will want a short, a YouTube video by a practitioner who's already made something. And there's plenty of those out there for some of the topics that we cover, and they'll watch that. So it's just covering those bases. But yeah, the podcasts I've found, and particularly now within things like Notebook LM, you can refine them a lot more.
Yeah, you can you can really drill down into certain topics, which is great, because before it was just like, I'm going to summarize the entire novel, play, or whatever source you've given it. Now you can say, I want you to look at this specific aspect of it, and it does a pretty good job, I think, of getting into some of the nuance there. Have you jumped on the vibe coding bandwagon? Have you had any experience of coding or using any AI coding in the classroom?
When you watch Darren Cox and stuff, and he's vibe coding out entire AI platforms, you're like, wow, that is light years ahead. And you're watching some people producing some amazing things. I've produced some really chunky HTML revision resources, flip cards and matching exercises. Just things that just make traditional resources electronically available and a little bit more interactive. So I've given it a go. I wouldn't say I can see the bandwagon. It's in the distance. I'm running to catch up, but I've given it a go. A little bit of HTML stuff to go with our Google Sites websites has been about as much as I've managed so far. Tried to teach myself coding over the summer. It didn't go very well.
And again, we've talked a lot about, we've drip fed a lot about text generation. But is there anything, if I was an English teacher or a media teacher, is there something you would recommend which would be my starting point with getting some text output of something that's available in the school, say like a Copilot or a Gemini that's within that ecosystem that's safe and pretty much safe and secure on the attendances?
For text generation, again, I'd go back to my first point, which is if you've got a complex reading resource, use your LLM to not just differentiate. So one of the things I've been doing is not just differentiating, but chunking and building in your retrieval into the reading. So creating simplified resources, but then with something that students have to interact with. It might just be a question, it might be a fill in the blank, it might be an open question that they have to deal with, but using that to create something and to generate, again, if you're looking for pure generation, grounding this, getting texts and materials that you want to use and you want to use as exemplars for students, and then getting them to create something. So you might, as an English teacher, be starting to look at, let's go back to Dickens. So you can give Copilot or Gemini several examples of Dickens. It's probably already very well versed in Dickens, and say, well, imagine we can set Dickens where we are now. Give us a version of this, and engage students in, what would a Dickensian, I don't know, we're in the northeast of England, we're mad on football. What would a Dickensian football report look like? Imagine Dickens describing the last, get a match report from Newcastle United and produce that in a Dickensian style, and just getting students into that kind of, just finding those hooks. I think finding creative hooks is a really good way of doing it, but grounding it with the sources.
So one thing that's come through to me from what we've been talking about is just going through that list, just the range of things you'll now be able to produce. And I can imagine you might not have made those things previously. That's just me taking educated guesses. So how have you found it in terms of giving you, again, I hate that save time analogy, because it's not save me time. I'm just doing more in the time. Have you found that as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think I'm a better teacher, but my resources are a heck of a lot better than they ever have been. Exemplars are more plentiful. Annotated texts are more plentiful. Model essays with commentaries are more plentiful. Feedback is more plentiful, because I'm able to do it more fluently. I just talk. We were talking about this before. You talk your feedback into a phone and then quickly process it into something that's a little bit more chunked up and uses we have a particular feedback format that we use. Drop it in there, format it like this, output it, there we go. So yeah, I'm doing and creating things, and it's actually opening up new ways of teaching. I'm a constructivist at heart. I like to put students at the heart of the learning process, and it gives me more time and space to do that, and flipping the learning. And that's, I think, one of the big things, is giving students resources. Because you can produce audio, you can produce text, you can produce things you never would be able to do before. You can give them this and say, right, okay, go and absorb that. And now I've got other ways to test how much of this you've taken on board and to support you in that process.
So, because I think we've got like 2 minutes left now, just if you were to give a teacher, an English teacher or media teacher, a top piece of advice. So if I was going to walk into work tomorrow morning, what is something I could do pretty much straight away?
Two things. Number one, differentiate, chunk, create something more accessible. 3-leveled versions of your text. Here's the text I want to work with. I need 3 different levels. Give the thing the context about who you're pitching this for. So it might be for students with where there's an attention issue. It might be for students who need something that's more broken down because of dyslexia. They need to see this in a clearer font or whatever. But differentiate would be number one. Differentiate and chunk. And number 2 would be get your questions. You can generate some quick quizzes, some quick knowledge checks, and exit tickets really quickly using these things, and practice. Have we got an issue with the Wi-Fi connection there?
I can hear you okay. I can hear you okay. You're a bit blurry, but I can still hear you fine.
That just is me blurry at the end of the day. And just get in there and practice. Get in there and have a play. You can't break it. Keep pressing buttons until you get what you want.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think probably, and again, I'm going to try to bring this back to those hesitant English teachers. You've probably got more skills than me as a computer science teacher in terms of how to get the best out of these machines. I'm a dyslexic, probably got a C in English, I think. I've never got like the top there in skills. And you probably are armed with more eloquent language than me in order to extract what you need out of these machines a little bit better.
And that's it. They work in language. That the breakthrough with the large language model was you can communicate with a computer using natural language, and that's the real game changer. We can get machines to do things that we want them to do using words.
Fantastic. And I think that is us almost out of time. So I'm going to say thank you very much, John. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And again, I think we've chatted a few times, but it's always nice to chat. Hopefully, we'll see each other in the new year at some in the real world. UK. I'm popping across the UK a little bit more than I used to, so it's nice to be back in Blighty and see some familiar faces. So again, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone that's joined us this evening. And I'll be back at the beginning of December. I think we're going to jump into design and technology classroom next time. So we're working our way through the subject slowly. Still want EYFS in primary. So if anyone out there knows anyone EYFS, because I think that's an underrated area where teachers can use AI, probably not putting it in front of kids. Anyone EYFS, send me a message. And thank you, everybody, and good night.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing